Okay, so good morning. It's Friday, December 18th, 2020. We're using this class as a demonstration on how to create an advertisement for your checkpoint number two. So Zanelia, I'm showing you here, so we took a nice quote, right? We have a picture of our celebrity, and then we have a simple reasoning why. The reason for creating this endorsement is that Bob Marley always promoted peace, love, and unity between all people. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
Okay. So Nasir and Isaac for checkpoint number two, you can take your favorite celebrity and you can create an advertisement or an endorsement for them based off of a social cause that you think would be best fit for them. Let me show you the PowerPoint about this. Okay. So our last class, here's a checkpoint number two. So up on the top is that's you creating an endorsement. The one that I just made. Actually, you know what? Let me insert an example for the other students. Let me see if I can get this to. Okay, so I'm just going to take my reasoning. What cat? I swear my cat is more needy than like a human baby. Okay, let's see if I can get this to fit right.
So I do this on the Google Docs or if no, I can't do it on Cement. Never mind.
You can do it on the instructions. I said you could do it by hand. You can do it like you see how it didn't take me long to do that, right?
Yeah.
I was just trying to get the. There we go. Okay. So now this is an example of a celebrity endorsement. And all I'm putting is a reasoning for the endorsement. Okay.
Okay.
The secondary one is why philanthropy could be negative. Um, I wonder if I should put something in there for that. Let's see. So we have this article here. Let's go to that article and look at that article, see what that has to say. Maybe I can actually put some of the text from that article. Okay. I wonder if I can actually grab this whole article. Let me see. Okay. Come back over to the article. Let's see if I can. Whoa. Okay, that's not gonna work. uh, this is the joy of teaching sometimes. Let's see. All right. Let me get rid of this right here. Let's see if I can get this in here now. Paste. All right, I just gotta move it around a little bit. It's not fitting the way I want. Yeah, that's all over the place. I can't fit that in there, so I'm just gonna have to go back to the hyperlink. So let's look at some of the negatives. Let me go over to the article, see what the article says. That's better. Okay. So this would give us some of the information. Let's see. So this one here. So that second one, I just put some highlights of the drawbacks of philanthropy. That a lot of the money that is being sent out to communities of color or to lower income communities are being facilitated by people. Yeah, everybody. We're not the only ones, guys. We only have some classes only have one student in it right now. So don't feel bad. They're among the that came up. I think we have a
Assembly.
assembly. I was telling Nasir that I wanted to add his name to the assembly. I think I'm just gonna have to do it at. Are you coming to the assembly, Nasir?
Yeah,
Okay. I wanna make sure that you get if you come. I'm gonna make sure that you get recognized today for your attendance because your attendance has been outstanding.
okay.
No, for real. Every time I open this computer, some mornings I didn't even I saw Nasir this morning on camera and I didn't even know who he was. I'm so used to just seeing the names of my students up that I don't know what everybody looks like. So I feel like I'm the only one that's got to be exposed. You know what I'm saying? But that's okay. My mama told me I was pretty, so I'm gonna roll with that. So while we have some time left in the class, I know that when you guys come back, it'll be a little bit repetitive. So our essential question was, so hopefully that'll help Isaac and Nasir. Those two examples. What I'll do is I'll post this up on Summit, so you guys can have it on Summit. That way you don't have to go back to the PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is on Summit, by the way, but I'm going to post a announcement that you guys can go to it. So our central question is, what do athletes and celebrities risk when they speak out or protest? We have looked at in the first class that athletes, who make a lot of money, who are exposed to other people, they put themselves at a risk of losing their money, sometimes losing their, let's see, hold on a second. Exactly. They'll lose their job, they'll lose their endorsements. So there's a lot of things that can happen. Colin Kaepernick was blackballed from the NFL simply for taking a knee during the national anthem. Eric Reed, that was another person who got blackballed. Muhammad Ali, who we're going to study, Muhammad Ali would not go to the Vietnam War. He refused to be drafted. Um, and Muhammad Ali said that when I want freedom, he said, I'm not going halfway around the world to kill other poor brown people. I'm not. He said, when I want freedom, it's you who are my oppressor. When I want equal treatment, it is you who are my oppressor. He said, I'd rather stay home and fight you than go halfway around the world and fight I'm not going to go around the world and kill other poor brown people. So just Muhammad Ali as an example, they lose their jobs, they lose their endorsements. So they have a risk when they speak out, they risk losing everything. So in 1960s in America, we had the civil rights movement brewing. The civil rights movement has been brewing since, if you're in my African American class, we're learning about abolitionists and the Civil War, after the Civil War. This has been brewing in American society since American society was founded. You can't create a society that says all men are created equal and then treat other men unequal. We can't have a document that says we the people that doesn't include everyone. And this is the original sin of the United States of America. This is the original problem with this nation, is that it was founded on the precepts of freedom, but freedom only for a specific type of person, which means that when the Constitution was written, a man was a white land owning person, not even just a white person. You actually had to own land. Voting was restricted from people. And then you have 100 years of Jim Crow. You have the Ku Klux Klan. You have racial discrimination, segregation. And so people in the 1960s had got quite tired of these injustices in American society and decided that it was time to fight back. The funny thing about the civil rights movements, and there's nothing funny per se about it, there's nothing humorous about the civil rights movement, but the verbiage in the civil rights movement. Has anyone ever noticed for all the time that you've ever studied the civil rights movement that it was never called the equal rights movement?
Yeah.
Black people weren't even asking for equal rights, okay? They were asking for civil rights. The rights not to be killed, the rights not to be discriminated, the right not to be mass incarcerated, the right not to be ostracized from the community or the world as a whole simply because of the color of your skin. Now, in 2008, I remember 2007, there were some seeds. Now, I know this might be, controversial for some people, but what do gay people want right now in America? What type of rights do gay people want? Anybody have an idea? What was legalized in 2008 or 2009? Gay marriage. So gay people or people who have, that inclination, they wanted equal rights. And that was in 2008, 2009. Black people in the 1960s were simply asking for civil rights, civility, the right to be treated as a human being. They weren't asking for equal rights. It was never called the equal rights movement. It was called the civil rights movement. And they couldn't even get that. Still not achieving that. That's why we have Black Lives Matter and we have these other social movements going on in the country. So the 1960s was a time that was rife with discrimination, with anger, American anger. So in the mid 1960s, we had a lot of stuff going on in the 1960s. You had multiple assassinations. You had the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 63. You had the assassination of Malcolm X in 1965. And then in 1968, you had the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King and RFK, Robert Kennedy, who was the brother of John F. Kennedy. So our country was going through these dramatic social changes. And so right before the 1968 Olympics, the Black athletes decided that they were going to boycott the Olympics. Why? Because they felt like Black Americans were being treated unfairly. What is the brother's name? Dr. Harry Edwards. Tommy Smith, and John Carlos were instrumental in this. So I want to show you a few-minute video just to have you have some background on the 1968 games, what was going on, why they decided to boycott, and what was the reaction from American society. So let me get a moment. I'm gonna pull this up for you. And we're gonna look at the story behind the 68 games real quick.
Top artists for the year. The Beatles, not a surprise. Paul Simon, Taylor Swift, Bob Marley and the Wailers. We're talking about the whole catalog of Bob Marley. See how the rest of the world listen to Spotify in 2020.
The 1968 U.S. Olympic track and field team is considered one of the greatest ever assembled to represent the U.S. in the Olympics. They won 28 medals and set 8 world records at the Games in Mexico City. The team included some of the fastest runners in the world at the time, like sprinters Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who made history when they accepted their medals and then raised their fists during the playing of the U.S. national anthem in a protest full of symbolism. And they almost didn't even show up that year.
Black men and women athletes have unanimously voted to fully endorse and participate in a boycott of the World Olympic Games in 1968.
Members of the team threatened to stay home in protest of racist treatment of Black athletes in America.
They will not participate in the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City unless something is done about these terrible evils and injustices.
So that in case our black boys don't want to go,
What would they have to do for you to go to Mexico?
boycott is still on it.
The story of this silent protest and the boycott that almost was starts with the buttons all 3 medal winners wore that day, the Olympic Project for Human Rights. The Olympic Project for Human Rights, or OPHR, was founded in 1967 by sociologist, educator, and former star athlete Dr. Harry Edwards. It was a coalition of prominent Olympic athletes that threatened to derail American Olympic glory by opting out of the Games, to protest the racism in sports that, for decades, had gone unaddressed. In the mid-20th century, sports seemed to be a leading example of improved racial equality in the United States. Black athletes like football player Kenny Washington and baseball player Jackie Robinson broke racial barriers by joining professional leagues in 1946 and 1947, which, until that point, had been whites only. College and professional sports teams gradually integrated from there, years ahead of racial segregation legally ending in the United States.
So the media began to promote the Black athlete as a symbol that racial democracy existed in the United States. If Jackie Robinson can make it, then why can't other Blacks make it? And so it was kind of a factor that was used to dismiss the question of institutionalized racism.
But in the 1960s, the myth of racial progress in America began to dissolve. The Civil Rights Act ended legal segregation in 1964, but Black Americans continued to face institutionalized racism and police brutality.
Integration simply wasn't successful in terms of improving Black people's lives, and you needed to force further change.
Years of frustration ultimately erupted in widespread violent riots.
I think the further we get away from it, we underestimate the influence of the riots. The riots happened in a lot of urban cities across America. Black people still live in terrible socioeconomic conditions in the cities, and that was just as much a problem as Jim Crow laws. So how do you attract attention to that?
A growing Black Power movement and Black student movement in the 1960s emboldened Black athletes to speak up about the racial injustices they endured off the field.
There's no difference between a Black and a white athlete. We're all out there sweating, we run on two legs. But it's a difference in the way society treats us after we leave the track.
But with the 1968 Olympics coming up, Black athletes saw an opportunity to push for change.
The idea of a Black Olympic boycott has been around since 1959, and it went through various fits and stops until you get to the Black Power Conference in 1967. And the Black Power Conference basically argued that you should use any means possible to force the government to pay attention to institutionalized racism.
For Harry Edwards, that meant organizing the Olympic Project for Human Rights.
And I think one of those means that are necessary right now is the Olympic boycott movement and the whole revolt of the Black athlete in this country.
He realized that he could use Black sports participation as a way to attract attention to the problem.
The OPHR had 5 key demands, among them being to disinvite South Africa and Rhodesia, 2 countries practicing apartheid, from competing in the Games, the removal of openly racist International Olympic Committee President Avery Brundage, and hiring Black coaches to U.S. teams. The potential boycott became a hot topic in the news and of debate among athletes.
All the Black athletes want to run, but we don't want to close the door on millions of Black people here in the United States. I don't see a boycott really helping the Negro cause.
In the months leading up to the Games in Mexico City, the OPHR kept members of the press guessing whether they would attend or not.
We will let you know about the future of your Olympic team when we deem it proper and when we feel that you can handle that kind of information. Right now, we just don't think that you're ready.
Tom, when will come a determination whether you, Lee Evans, and others will or will not boycott the Olympics?
I wish I could tell you.
Ultimately, it came down to a vote.
The decision was made that if there wasn't really a kind of unified or the majority of Black athletes would participate, the boycott would be called off, because those who did boycott, like Tommy Smith, would have been boycotting in vain. Another Black person simply would have taken their place.
Even though most of the OPHR's demands remained unmet, the athletes headed to Mexico City with plans to make their own demonstration if the opportunity arose, which it did on October 16th, following the men's 200-meter final. OPHR members Tommy Smith and John Carlos won gold and bronze, respectively, and Smith set a new world record. After the race, they solemnly approached the medal stand, shoeless, wearing black socks, accepted their medals, and just as the U.S. national anthem began to play, did this.
Now that we've helped people customize and save with Liberty Mutual, we can finally do some beach reading.
For the full duration of the Star-Spangled Banner, Smith and Carlos bowed their heads and each raised a black-gloved fist in the air to protest the racial injustice in their home country and show solidarity with those fighting for equality. The fists are not the only symbolic gesture in this image, as Tommy Smith explained later.
The right glove signified the power within Black America. The left glove signified Black unity. The scarf that was worn around my neck signified Blackness. John Carlos and me wore black socks without shoes to also signify our poverty.
Additionally, John Carlos wore his jacket unzipped, a violation of Olympic etiquette to show solidarity with working-class Americans. He also wore beads to honor victims of lynching. And finally, all 3 medal winners, including silver medalist Peter Norman of Australia, wore
Buttons reading Olympic Project for Human Rights. There were some boos in the stadium last night.
This moment was the ultimate manifestation of the work of Harry Edwards and the OPHR to intersect outspoken political activism with sport. and it ended Smith and Carlos's Olympics.
When the International Olympic Committee suspended them Friday, their credentials were taken away and they were told they could not stay in Mexico.
They were dropped from the U.S. Olympic team and given 48 hours to leave Mexico. Sports journalist Howard Cosell criticized the U.S. Olympic Committee's decision in this fiery broadcast from Mexico City.
They say the games are sports, not politics, something separate and apart from the realities of life. But the black athlete says he is a human being before he is an athlete, that he wants equality everywhere, not just within the arena.
Tommy Smith and John Carlos were saying black athletes don't have it made in American society. We may be famous, but we face the same discrimination that other black people do. And we don't appreciate being used as a way to counter the black struggle coming out of black communities. Black athletes are black. People have multiple identities. I think Colin Kaepernick is representing a voice in the black community, which is the same thing I think that Carlos and Smith were saying, that the black struggle is more than just about integration and assimilation. It's also about empowering this particular community. And people like Tommy Smith, Harry Edwards, John Carlos came from poor black communities.
Which is why this protest on the Olympic medal stand wasn't just about sports, as Tommy Smith explained to Howard Cosell the next day.
Do you think you represented all black athletes in doing this?
I can say I represented Black America. I'm very proud to be a black man and also to have won the gold medal. And this, I thought, I could represent my people by letting them know that I'm proud to be a black man.
Okay, so just to kind of recap, let me get my screen back up here. Let's go to the video. So why did Tommy Smith and John Carlos, why did they raise black fists? What were they symbolizing? What was the purpose? How you doing, Shanice? Welcome to class. So while watching the video, he said in 1968, America, we had problems with civil rights and civil equality, or equality in general for people of color. So when Tommy Smith and John Carlos placed first and second on the podium, why did they raise their hands? Why did they make this symbolic gesture? What was the point of it? Nasir, do you have an idea from watching the video why they put their hands up like that? Okay. Thank you for being honest. This was a protest, okay? Remember it. They were not going to compete in the games at all. They decided that if they didn't go to the games, that another athlete would simply take their place. So when they got to the podium, there were several symbols going on in this picture. This is an iconic picture. Why did they raise the black fist? Well, on one hand, they wanted to correlate the power of black unity on the left hand. And on the right hand, it was solidarity with people who are suffering. They went to the, so as the athletes waited to go to the podium, and we saw the video where they were headed to the podium, they told this third guy here, I believe his name is Greg Norman, he was an Australian sprinter at the time, that they were going to use this opportunity to protest. When they protested, they did a symbolism. So they went to the podium with just black socks on with no shoes. And that was to bring attention to black poverty in the United States. The beads that were worn around John Carlos's neck were to bring attention to the lynching of black Americans. And like I said before, the raised black gloves, fists represent their solidarity and support with black people oppressed around the world. So what they did, Nasir, is they took their First Amendment right and they protested. What happened after these guys protested? What were they told to basically do? They used their First Amendment right to protest. What happened to John Carlos and Tommy Smith? Shanice, were you watching the video with us? Isaac, are you there? Losing Alia. What happened to John Carlos and Tommy Smith after they protested? Okay. So Isaac, what happened to them after they protested like this on the podium? They protested on the podium. What happened to them? Okay. All right, Shanice, I can respect that. You're at work. I get that. So I'll try to moderate a little bit to be helpful here, since we have some people that are at work right now. Basically, Carlos and Smith were asked to leave the country. They were given 48 hours to leave Mexico. And they were told that they could no longer compete in the games for the rest of the year. So they were asked to leave the country. Was it worth ending their Olympic careers? That's a personal question. This is what the whole point of this topic is. When you achieve fame, stardom, celebrity, or status in society, is it worth putting yourself out there? Is it worth risking your career in order to bring attention to other people's suffering? So I know that some of us are at work, but in the chat, if you could answer the question simply, if it was you, if you were in a position of power, or if you were in a position of influence, whether you were an athlete, whether you were an entertainer, would you risk your money to protest the rights of others? Okay. What about you, Nasir? Would you risk, if you were, let's say tomorrow that you got signed to the NBA and you were getting millions and millions of dollars, and you saw things happening in your neighborhood or to people who are like you, would you risk your money and your fame to bring attention to the problems of other people? Would you be willing to protest? Okay. So it seems like the consensus is that most students would take the risk to protest. John Carlos and Tommy Smith were eventually let back into society. They were talented men. They had talents that they could give, and eventually they ended up playing professional football. But there's a third member. We got about 5 minutes, so I'm just going to try to squeeze this in real quick. There's a third member at that podium, and his name was Peter Norman. Now, Peter Norman was from Australia. He clearly was not a black man. He didn't have any stake in the plight of black Americans. When Tommy Smith and John Carlos said to him, let's protest these games, he decided to wear a pin for human rights. Now, it's actually the gloves. He is the one that gave him the idea to wear the gloves, one set of gloves on different hands. So Peter Norman, like I just told you, he was snubbed for life from the Olympics, from the 72 games in Munich, and rather send a sprinter from Australia. He did not get a chance to ever go back to the Olympics. He was in his own country ostracized and treated differently the rest of his career. And he fell into some painkiller addictions, drug addictions later on in his life. And he never really got the chance to win Olympic gold. So Peter Norman, what I just told you, he immediately retired from the sport and began to suffer from depression, alcoholism, and a painkiller addiction. And he used the actual silver medal that he won that day as a doorstop to hold something for his door. Unfortunately, he died without being acknowledged for his contributions to the sport. Though he kept his silver medal, he was regularly excluded from events related to the sport. Even when the Olympics came to Australia in Sydney in 2000, he was not recognized. When he died in 2006, Carlos and Smith, who had kept in touch with Norman for years, were pallbearers at the Australian's funeral. This video link here is a link of Peter Norman's nephew, I believe. He wrote a book about Peter Norman and the cost of speaking up and speaking out. So your third checkpoint, and this will go up on Summit after the break when we come back, is all going to be about Peter Norman, Tommy Smith, and John Carlos. So this will be your third PowerPoint. I'm going to put that in your third checkpoint. I'm going to put that in a Google Doc for you. And that's what we will do after the winter or holiday break. So Nasir, I encourage you to get that checkpoint 1 done if you haven't got that done during the duration of class. There is an example, Isaac and Shanice, there is an example of how to create a celebrity endorsement. I will put that up on Summit for you guys. And we have 1 minute left. So unless I have any questions, I'm going to let you guys go. And checkpoint 3 will go up when we come back from our break. Any questions? Okay, so I don't see anything in chat. So Nasir, thank you for coming. Make sure you guys come to the assembly. Isaac, Shanice, I will send you guys an invitation. And Nasir, I appreciate your punctuality and your consistency in coming to class. It is a bright spot. Okay, so thank you guys, and you enjoy your afternoon.